This beautiful girl was forced to take off her clothes. She was falsely accused of stealing something. As she was left with only her last piece of clothing, her boss told her she had to strip completely. The girl, with a look of disbelief, felt she shouldn't be treated like this, but to prove her innocence, she had no choice but to comply. When it was clear she was wearing nothing, the boss didn't return her clothes. Instead, he handed her an apron, claiming he needed to take her clothes for testing, and that she had to cooperate in the warehouse. A man who claimed to be a police officer had just called the restaurant manager, telling her that there was a thief at the restaurant, and that he had video evidence. The young girl he was talking about had blonde hair. The manager immediately thought of someone. Wasn't this the cashier at the counter? She couldn't believe it. But after verifying the identity of Becky with the officer, she had no choice but to admit it. It was Becky, so she had no choice but to call Becky in and tell her about the situation. Becky, feeling helpless, answered the phone and desperately tried to prove her innocence, but the police officer wouldn't listen to her explanations, directly ordering the manager to search Becky's pockets. Becky had no choice but to comply. When the manager searched every pocket, besides her phone, no stolen goods were found. However, when the police officer learned of this, he didn't give up. Instead, he demanded the manager further investigate Becky's locker. Even after a thorough search, nothing was found. At this point, the invasion of Becky's privacy was severe, but the situation didn't end there. The police officer made an even more outrageous suggestion. He ordered Becky to strip and have the manager conduct a body search. Becky felt humiliated. Every cell in her body was rejecting this, but the officer seemed to have anticipated this moment, so he began to threaten Becky. If she didn't cooperate, the police would charge her with obstruction of justice and send her to jail. Faced with the choice of stripping or going to prison, Becky had no choice but to comply. She reluctantly stripped in front of everyone for the search, but the officer insisted that 2 supervisors needed to be present, so the manager called in other colleagues. As per the officer's instructions, they helped Becky remove her outer garments. Even then, no stolen goods were found. However, the officer's behavior became more and more extreme, constantly trying to push Becky's boundaries. He insisted that Becky had hidden the stolen money in her underwear, and demanded that she remove her last piece of clothing. Becky nearly lost control when she heard this, but after a moment of thought, she realized there was no turning back. Besides, the ones searching her were women. So, under the officer's urging, Becky had no choice but to remove her last layer of protection. But did you think the situation ended there? The officer made another unreasonable demand.